everyone. Such a pleasure to be here. Such a pleasure. I'm going to sit down with you guys because that's how I feel most comfortable. Have my water nearby. All right, and I have some notes with me so that I can stay connected with my intention here of what I want to share. So let's see. Yeah. So my family and I experienced something that most families fear, which is CPS. And we experienced something that most families don't have the opportunity to do, which is have the proof to sue CPS for what they did and win. We fought the law and we won. Yes. We won a $700,000 settlement, significant, but we didn't win because of the lawsuit or the money. In fact, the day that we signed, can you guys hear me? The day that we signed the paperwork, and I knew that I was going to receive my portion of that money, I was more angry than I understood. The money wasn't going to fix what they did to us, and it wasn't going to heal the trauma that my kids and I experienced. It didn't leave me feeling safe or cure our PTSD. The purpose of the lawsuit was to help ensure that what happened to us was less likely to happen to other families because they didn't want to have to pay that kind of money again. Healing heals. Growing from an experience heals. And we won because we learned that we can heal from tragedy, that we can heal from injustice and trauma, and we grew in very powerful ways. And that's how we won. CPS did what they do best, and I did what I do best. I can now say that I'm grateful for our CPS ordeal. I'm grateful because of who I get to be standing or sitting in front of you today. I'm more powerful. I'm more compassionate. I'm more rooted in my authority over my right as a sovereign being and a sovereign parent. I'm a bigger, deeper, and more fearless conduit of my emotional processes and the emotional processes of my clients and community that I serve. Even though I mourned and grieved for that sweet, innocent family who trusted CPS to get them, who trusted CPS to help and support them through a trying time and was met with a harsh reality, I am more grateful to be standing or sitting here today, the embodiment of empowerment that I am today. That's the story that I'm here to share with you. And it's my intention to share our story in solidarity, to relieve, inspire, and empower you. By a show of hands, how many of you are parents? Yeah. And how many of you are scared of CPS or have been scared of CPS? Yeah. Yeah. You aren't alone, unfortunately. I call CPS terrorists because too many families in the US are terrified of CPS. Good, well-intentioned, conscientious, intentional parents. They're terrified of the power that imperfect humans have coupled with the authority of the US government to make choices about what they deem is best for children that are not their own. I'm grateful to be speaking to a crowd that I don't have to elaborate on that to, right? Let's see. Yeah. I didn't always get it though. I was one of those, if you don't do anything wrong, then you have nothing to be afraid of people before this CPS experience. one of the reasons that I'm grateful for what we went through is because of how it opened my eyes. I used to be a proponent for children's rights. It's a document signed by countries to ensure that children have choices and feel safe and things like that. Until I realized who would be enforcing those children's rights, right? Now I'm more of a proponent for parental rights. The president of parentalrights.org is Jim Mason, who was also he's also the vice president of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, which was our lawyers that fought for us to get my kids returned to me and then to sue CPS. They fought like bulldogs in that courtroom and in those, deposition meetings and all of that. They're incredible. So just to put that out there for anybody, hopefully you don't experience any need for litigation, but in case you do, parentalrights.org, Jim assured me that all these anarchist people can contact them, that they share values. I hope it never comes to that, but in the event that it does. So I intend to share some preventative measures for avoiding CPS, what we experienced, but before I get to that, I want to share our story. So my kids and I'm a single mom, have 3 kids. My oldest is now about to be 21. I have a son that's about to be 13, and I have a 10-year-old daughter. And about 8 years ago, we decided to take off and live on the road. We're super excited to go travel the world. I was like, as a single mom, to be able to give that to my kids, to be able to travel the country and show them the world. I traveled with my mom as a kid, and I wanted to give that to my kids. So we took off, and we had an RV for about a year, but it was so big and heavy, and it wasn't the experience that I experienced with my mom, which was traveling cross country in our minivan. So my kids and I made a bed in the back of the van, packed like we were on vacation, and we took off. And we were having the time of our life. I call it simple abundance. We lived very simply, but in the most incredible, abundant experiences. Traveled all over the country, learned, lived, loved. It was incredible. And then my youngest daughter got diagnosed, or she was sick. She got really sick with something that looked like the flu. But it seemed a little different, so I took her to a holistic doctor that recommended I race her to the ER. And she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And because of our alternative lifestyle, the hospital called CPS on us. And the CPS workers came in, and I thought that they were going to help us. And they didn't. The CPS worker that they assigned to our case shared with me that she had type 2 diabetes. This was a very personal case for her. That was a red flag for me at the time. I knew this woman was either going to be our greatest asset or our worst adversary. Turns out it was the latter, depending on how you look at it. Number of things happened. She missed appointments. We ended up being free to leave because they never started a case with us because she missed so many appointments because of her own medical issues. So we left. It's kind of a long story, but we ended up back at my friend's house, and CPS had called looking for us. And I was like, oh, we're at my friend's house. You guys have come here. You've seen how we are, getting ready to leave for Oregon. We're going to go settle down up there. And the next morning, CPS showed up at my door with a sheriff and 2 workers. And they wanted to conduct an investigation, right? The caseworker with type 2 diabetes criticized every single thing about the way that I was caring for my daughter. She didn't get it. She didn't want to. At one point, she stepped outside. Mind you, she'd never met my kids before. She'd only ever talked to me in a meeting once at the CPS building. She didn't know much about us. She showed up, or she stepped outside to make a phone call. And she came back in and she said, well, unfortunately, we're going to have to get the courts involved now. And I said, well, what does that mean? And she said, it means I'm taking your kids right now. My kids and I were a puddle on the floor, holding each other and begging not to be separated. And the CPS worker told me that if I didn't give them my kids right there, that the police officer was going to arrest me. And so I had to take my kids. My kids were not only separated from me, they were separated from each other because my youngest daughter had a medical disability. And she had to go to a foster home that specialized in helping kids with medical issues. My son went to a different foster home. They were 4 and 7. Before my daughter went to a foster home, she was brought to the hospital. The CPS worker took her to the hospital. The doctors told her immediately that nothing was wrong with my daughter, that she was fine. They ran tests. They said, she's fine, there's nothing wrong, she can go home immediately. And the CPS worker thankfully wrote that down in her notes. But she told them that my daughter couldn't leave until they found a foster home that could take care of her. And my 4-year-old daughter was in the hospital alone for a week. My 7-year-old son is very attached to me, very connected. Always has been, even as a little. I feel like he had the hardest time. He was in a foster home and they told him that he couldn't, once he got into bed, that he wasn't allowed to get out of bed until they came and woke him up in the morning. He never slept alone. He woke up every night with nightmares. And he couldn't get out of bed. He was told he couldn't get out of bed. And I didn't know what to do. When they took my kids, they didn't tell me why. So I scrambled to put together anything that I possibly could to prove that I was a good mom, that I was taking care of my kids well. Thankfully, I had an incredible tribe that stood beside me and supported me. They connected me with all the right people. They made sure that I called the HSLDA as soon as CPS mentioned homeschooling. And CPS heard our story and they said, well, normally, we're a homeschool organization, you are a homeschool family, but this is more of a medical case. We're gonna talk amongst ourselves and we'll get back to you. And they decided to take our case. They sent a lawyer to our first appointment, our first court hearing. So this is the funny thing about the justice system, right? Justice system. At the first court date, which is supposed to be within 72 hours of them taking your children, you're also supposed to be able to talk to your kids on the phone within 24 hours of them being taken. Neither of those things happened. So many things didn't happen, and so many things did that were just the CPS worker calling me to tell me that my kids were really happy in their foster homes and that they talked about me a lot, but they didn't say they wanted to come home. Like, why would you say that? It's just so many moments like that. But that first court date, it's not for the parents to be able to explain anything. It's just for the judge to look over the report that the CPS worker put together and decide whether they feel that the children should be taken. And then you have to wait another month for a court date where you actually get to speak. Thankfully, because I had private lawyers and not public defenders, a public defender, we got me to be able to speak to the judge the next day. We got a private hearing with the judge the next morning. And I went in and I spoke at length, referring back to my care of my daughter from what I learned from the doctors, what the doctors had told me. And at the end, the judge said, well, you seem like a good mom, but we can't have a dead kid on our hands. It was 30 days before I got my son back, and it was 50 days before I got my littlest daughter back. Visitation was 2 hours a week. I wasn't allowed to talk about what was happening with my kids. And if I encouraged my kids to be emotional in any way, they were going to cut back my visitation. There were so many things, so many things. I lived in fear every day that my daughter was going to die in foster care. The foster mom had the biggest heart. She said that she saw the first day that she met me that it was unjust what was happening to me, and so she gave me her private number and we stayed in touch, and that was very helpful. But she couldn't make medical decisions what was going on, and my daughter was having dangerously low blood sugars. I don't know if any of you know anything about blood sugar, but usually people are at about 100 on average. 70 is considered low, 60 is considered dangerously low. My daughter was going down into the 40s every day for over a week before they were able to adjust her insulin correctly. I'd be driving through town and I'd hear an ambulance. And the first thing I'd think is, I'm going to get my baby. It's a lot of trauma around being separated from my children. A lot of trauma around fighting to be with my children. Why was I having to fight for something that was innately mine? I felt like a muzzle was put over. I couldn't talk. I couldn't share these things that I knew. Nobody was listening except my own lawyers, and there was only so much they could share because of the way the bureaucratic system works. I felt like a wild animal, that somebody had stolen my babies, and so I was stuck in a cage waiting to be with them again. My lawyers contacted the endocrinologist that first saw my daughter when they took her to the hospital after they took her from me. And the endocrinologist signed a paper saying that based on her A1C, which is a test that they do to see what her blood sugar's been over the last 90 days, an average number, based on that A1C, that they were not only did I take good care of my daughter's blood sugar, but that they were impressed by how low her number had gone down closer to normal since diagnosis, because they could compare it to the number that they had when she was first diagnosed, and it had gone down significantly. And that affidavit was what made CPS give me my daughter back and drop the case and walk away. When I got my kids back, I thought, oh, everything's going to be great because we're back together again and everything's just going to go back to normal. But it didn't. That's not how PTSD works. It's not how trauma works. We all had so much anxiety. We had so much fear around CPS doing that again. This beautiful life that we'd lived on the road became scary to me. I was scared that some Debbie do-gooder on the street would be worried for my kids and call CPS, and then CPS would show up and take my kids again. Because they wouldn't see that what had been done before was unjust. They'd just see that it had happened. Thank you. Blessing. We did. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Thanks for sharing. Thank you. You guys still hear me? Yeah. So we took off from Southern California to go find healing. We took off in our van on July 4th, and as we were driving up to Oregon to cross those state lines, fireworks were exploding in the sky all along the way. Ever since then, July 4th has had an actual significant meaning to me, much more significant meaning. It's the day we celebrated our independence, our freedom. I got up to Oregon and it was like those mountains were just pouring mama love back into me. We wandered around a little bit looking for where we were going to call home. We were up by the Oregon coast, which, by the way, is my favorite landscape on this planet, so far as I know. Lots of adventures ahead of us. But we're up there, and Rethinking Everything conference was happening. It's an unschooling conference, and CPS had tried to use it against us in court, tried to make us look crazy, calling it a cult and all this stuff, right? And I decided I wanted to go to RE. It was like in like 4 or 5 days, and I had like $0 in my pocket. And I just put it out on Facebook. I was like, you know what? I'm going to RE. My kids and I need this. And here's my PayPal if anybody wants to contribute. And we crowdfunded our way all the way to Alabama from Oregon for Rethinking Everything. I was part of our healing, being surrounded by our community, sharing our story with our tribe, being held and hugged, and feeling safe again. After RE, we were like, well, now what? We had met a family in Oregon that had a house that we went and visited them with, their unschooling family, and they had bought another house up in Portland. They were going to rent that house out down in Rogue River, Oregon, and I was like, did you guys find somebody to rent the house? And they were like, oh, we would so love for you guys to come stay in it. And I was like, okay, well, we're just looking for somewhere for the winter, just for the colder months. And we got there, and within days we were like, oh no, this is it. We're here. We're good. We were on 20 acres of forest property out in the middle of Oregon. It was a dream. It was a sanctuary. It was a space for healing. It was a space where we didn't have to worry about random people pulling into our driveway. Although that did happen a couple times, and thank goodness I had people there with me when I went into panic attack. I remember the first time it happened. It was, by the way, it was like religious people trying to come give us pamphlets to go to their church or something. The first time it happened, my friend Joanne was standing next to me, and she must have seen the look on my face, because she put her hand on mine and she said, "I don't think CPS would drive a car like that. I think they'd be already getting out of the car." She just knew exactly what to say. She knew that's what my first thought was. There's two things that got me through this whole thing with CPS. One was my own personal growth, looking inward, looking for opportunities to grow and heal. And the other was tribe. The other was tribe. I fought my lawsuit in that house. I did my healing in that house, the bulk of it. I helped my kids with their anxiety, insomnia, all of that. We did all of that healing. We were there for almost 2 years. And the day we got that settlement money, we bought an RV. This is a much better setup than we had before. Appreciate it. Oh my goodness. That was healing, just envisioning that, just imagining that. Right? Yeah, we took off, traveled, had an incredible time, intended to go back to Oregon. Stopped in Austin, fell in love with Austin, found our community, our tribe on property there. I've been there for just over 3 years, and it continues to be healing for us. Not just my tribe sister here. We've been living together in community for just over 3 years now. And she's been there for the residual healing, right? It just seems to continue to be opportunities to heal. She's been there for all of that in really powerful ways. I feel safe with her, and she reminds me who I am. Tribe. I'm all about it. Big proponent for it. So, one of the things that I wanted to mention is, I was talking to Nadja, and I was like, can you help me remember some of the things that I've done to heal, and some of the things that were so traumatic and hard for us and all that? Can you help me recall those things for this talk? And then it dawned on me that that's part of my healing, is that those things are so integrated that I don't even recall them now. That's a really powerful message that I wanted to share here today. It was traumatic, what we experienced. But we're okay. We're okay. I want to share a little bit about preventative things that I feel families can do to keep themselves safe from CPS. As safe as can be. First thing I would do is leave the U.S. No, I'm just kidding. Safest way. Anarchapulco is looking really tempting right now. I still have some fear and trauma around the medical community. Still scared every time I take my daughter in to her doctor's appointments that the doctor's gonna be like, "Oh, this isn't perfect enough." Still and I'm like, yes, I'd love to live somewhere where I don't have to worry about that, where doctors don't think that they're more of an authority over you and your children than you are. I would love that. But if you're going to reside in the U.S., there's a few things that I would recommend. First of all, if you're a homeschooler, becoming a member of the HSLDA, they really stand up for you. They really protect you. If you're not a homeschooler, parentalrights.org, again, they're an incredible legal organization that really believes in parents having the right to make choices for their children. The government doesn't have a choice, doesn't get to have a choice in that. Knowing your rights, that's the biggest. I didn't know my rights when CPS showed up at my door. I'd also say to not be naive, because that was the other thing that really got me in trouble there. I really thought that CPS was going to show up and help us, that they were going to get us. And you just never know what person, what imperfect human with this, authority of the government is going to show up and try to understand your family, right? So knowing your rights, know that you don't even have to let them in the door. You don't even have to talk to them. If they don't have enough evidence that they can take to a judge and get a warrant to have to talk to you, you don't have to talk to them. I did not know that. I did not know that. On our property, one of the things that I feel safe about is that we have a gate leading into our driveway. And we can close that gate. CPS can't come in. They have to leave a card on the gate, and we get to choose whether to call them back or not. By the way, my biggest fear was that CPS was going to get vindictive and come after us again. That was my biggest fear, right? And when I was doing my deposition, at one point, CPS's lawyer, who, was very kind, very nice. I was terrified he was going to be very aggressive, and my lawyers were like, "Oh, we're not going to let him do that." He was very kind, and he innocently had asked me if I was going to be visiting my friend that we had stayed with when all that happened. If I was going to be visiting her there that weekend. I had said something about, doing some healing stuff. I was sharing, a healing modality that I did so that I'd be able to enter that house again without being crippled with the, flashbacks. And so he's like, "Oh, are you planning on visiting your friend this weekend while you're here in town?" And I was just like, so my lawyers got a video of our depositions. They videoed the depositions, which was incredible, and I'll tell you about that in a moment, why that was such a great idea. But anyway, watching the video later and seeing my face, I had this out of body kind of experience. It was surreal. I just was like a deer in the headlights, and I just broke down and started hyperventilating because CPS would know where I was and when I was going to be there. And my lawyers ushered me out of the room, and bless Jim Mason's heart, he is not a teddy bear by reputation. But he was hugging me. He's like, "I don't hug anyone, but I want to hug you right now." He's so sweet. He's like, "I only hug my mother and my daughters." That's it. Maybe his wife probably too, but yeah. But yeah, he's like, and I told him, "I'm just so scared that CPS is going to show up and take my kids again, that they're going to be mad at me." And he said, "Oh, honey, CPS is not going to do that. CPS is not going to mess with you again unless they have seriously solid evidence against you, because you showed them that you will fight." And I was like, "Oh, that sounds amazing." So that was another blessing that came from this immunity to an extent. Again, like I said, that's the caveat, right? The doctors. Always afraid that if the doctors say something, then CPS will do something again. Like I said, Acapulco's looking mighty appealing. But yeah, so with the depositions, so my lawyers paid, invested in getting video of everybody doing their depositions. And this CPS worker that took my kids was arguing with my lawyers about the reasons why she took my kids. She was arguing basically that she knew better than the endocrinologist about my daughter's health. We have video of her doing that. We have video of her saying that the reason that she took my kids is because I was a flight risk. And my lawyer was like, "Well, were they under your jurisdiction at the time?" And she was like, "Well, no, but something could go wrong with her in the future, and we couldn't have her mom just take her out of here where we couldn't keep an eye on her." You don't get to take somebody's kids for a hypothetical future that you're imagining. So grateful to have those. And in case you're curious, the CPS worker, by the time we did the depositions, she didn't work for CPS anymore. She did, however, work for the Adult Protective Services, which is still, families. So hopefully now that our lawsuit is final, she's not doing that anymore either. I think she'd make a really great Walmart greeter. Actually, I think she'd make a terrible one, but I think it would be a good job for her. Yeah, bless her heart. I can't know why she did what she did. I can't know if it was, malicious or just from her own fear. She was dealing with a lot of her own medical stuff. Maybe she was afraid for my daughter. Who knows? I like to assume the best in people and positive intent. But some of the things that she said and things that she did, like making the comment about my kids not, talking about me but not saying they want to come home, things like that, just felt a little malicious. She did end up being taken off of my case at one point because the county council, which is their lawyers, saw that she was very aggressive, very, can't remember the word they used, but that she obviously had an agenda. At one point through all of this, I was connected with a CPS worker that was a supervising CPS worker in another part of California who also had type 1 diabetes. And she really helped me understand how unjust this situation was that I was going through. She was like, okay, look. She's like, let me give you an idea of what actual neglect is, okay? She said, we had a teenage boy and his mom that were the son was being admitted to the hospital continuously because of high blood sugars and diabetic ketoacidosis and things. And so we took custody of the son for the weekend, with the mom able to stay with the son while we gave her information to help her be able to care for her son better. And he was released back to her at the end of the weekend. She said, what's happening to you is not okay. She said she's seen, hundreds of CPS reports come through, right? Reports that they send to the declarations, I think they're called, that they give to the judge. And she said usually they're about 4 to 5 pages. The one that our CPS worker gave to the judge was 30 plus pages. She's like, this woman had an agenda. Yeah. And you just never know with CPS workers if you're going to get somebody that has an agenda. So back to the preventative, know your rights. Don't be naive. What is his name? Morales, that wrote, oh my goodness, the name's Legally Kidnapped. He's a former CPS worker that turned, what do you call it? Whistleblower. I was like, no, this one. Anyway, not a trained whistle, but anyway. Well, I guess it could be. But anyway, so he wrote a book called Legally Kidnapped, and he has a lot of really good information in there that I recommend. But knowing your rights is good, knowing that you don't have to answer the door, you don't have to talk to them, you don't have to let your kids talk to them in private. You can record the conversation. Another service that I learned about is called Legal Shield. And it's a really awesome legal service that helps all kinds of areas of life, right? But one of the things that they do is you can, you have a 24-hour emergency number. So if CPS shows up at your door and you accidentally open it, you can be like, hold on one moment, I want to get my lawyer on the phone. And I feel like CPS is going to change their tune if they know that a lawyer is witnessing this conversation, right? Yeah. So those are some super preventative things that you can do, right? If CPS shows up at your door, though, those are all things to have done before CPS shows up at your door. If they show up, knowing your rights, not answering the door. If you get their card, you don't have to call them. If you choose to contact them for whatever reason, or I'll just say if you don't contact them, they have to close the case within 30 days. So they have to make an assessment. And if they don't have any information, then they close it with nothing. If you do end up choosing to decide to contact them, and that's what a lot of legal people will just say, well, just talk to them. Because they think, well, and it's funny because it's like, you're a lawyer. You should know that just because you're not doing anything wrong doesn't mean that CPS isn't going to find something, or whoever it is, right? And the way they twist your words, and they, it's bizarre. If you get a card at your door, I've gotten so many calls and messages, and being connected to so many families that CPS has shown up and they contact me, or they're put in contact with me. And they're very upset for for obvious reasons. And the first thing that I encourage them to do is get out everything that they have to say. Purge all their fears, all their worries, cry, get it all out until they get to a place where they can think straight again, where they can center themselves. If you're going to interact with CPS, CPS is like sharks. Can sniff out blood in the water, right? They can smell your fear, your insecurities. So really getting all of that out and processing it, and then centering back into yourself and remembering the badass that you are, the intentional reasons that you do the things that you do, really centering and rooting back into yourself. If you are going to contact CPS, if you are going to return their call, being centered in yourself is a good way to show up. More ensures success on your part. So yeah, getting centered. Let me think. If CPS leaves a card on your door and you decide that you're going to be in touch with them, there's a few things that are helpful to do. One is gather character witnesses from people that know you well. Have them write documents to share with the CPS worker. Take pictures of your home so they don't have to come inside. Take your kids to a doctor, get a physical checkup, and submit that, showing that there's nothing, physically wrong with your kids. If if they go to a therapist, have a therapist write something, whatever ways you can show that your kids are happy, healthy, safe, all of that. Pictures of your home, character witnesses, whatnot. It creates a really good foundation. Even if you never end up talking to them in person, if they have that information, they have to include it in your case, and then when they close it, that's all that's in there. They can't misconstrue anything. Those things are helpful. If the hardest one for me is when people contact me or are put in contact with me who CPS has already taken their kids. That's the hardest one. And not only do I know the trauma firsthand that this family is possibly experiencing or going to experience in their own flavor, right? But at that point, you just have to jump through CPS's stupid hoops until you can get them back. My son, always unschooled, was put in public school when he was in foster care. I think he went for not even a week. Then when he was returned to me, I was told I had to put him in foster care, or I had to put him in public school also. And thankfully, he came home with lice, so we got a few days to not have to go, right? Blessings in disguise. We don't vaccinate, things like that, so took a couple more days to get the paperwork about not immunizing, blah, blah, blah. It just, when my son went to went to public school again, it was like 2 or 3 weeks before the school year was going to be out. And I was like, is this what the government thinks is best for a child, to be the new kid in a school twice in 2 weeks when school's going to be out in another, how is that even, I don't have to convince you guys, the idiocy of the system. You have to jump through their stupid hoops. Yeah. And they're going to say and they're going to do what they're going to do. And hopefully you're going to do what you do. And, even if your kids aren't taken, but CPS has a voluntary case plan. It's a funny little term that they use. That's what they were trying to get me to do, was sign a voluntary case plan, and they kept rescheduling appointments. And I was like, at one point I was like, Mom, this voluntary case plan doesn't feel so voluntary. Not at all. There's this quote that I want to share with you guys. I have about 13 minutes left. You find this quote really fast. I didn't have it ready, so it's going to take me a moment. I'm writing a book about our experience to go in more in depth about it. I had hoped to have it done by the time this started, but okay, nope, it's not that one. Well, it's a Marianne Williamson quote, I think. It says something about whether a crisis ultimately lifts us or sinks us depends on who we choose to be as we go through it. Yeah. Not going through it alone is the key. There's so many people that reach out to me that tell me, oh, CPS showed up at my door, or CPS took my kids, and they're afraid to speak publicly about it. They're afraid to say that it happened. And then they can't rally the support. Nova Ohm, if you want to find me. I live my life very out loud, very, very publicly. And when CPS showed up at my door, when I knocked at the door and saw that there was a sheriff, first thing I did was jumped on Facebook and told my tribe, alerted my tribe. Before CPS was even gone with my kids, I had my inbox was full of messages from people reaching out, making sure we were okay, wanting to know how they can help, all of that. Yeah, it was really huge. My oldest daughter, this was 6 years ago, so she was about 14 at the time. We had decided she would stay with my mom. We went and stayed with my mom after we had first left our voluntary case plan thing that didn't work out. We went and stayed with my mom. She had a farm and had a ton of baby goats. So we went down there to go help her with her baby goats while I was getting adjusted to caring for my daughter's diabetes and doing what CPS said we had to do, which was get a house to live in. When we left and we were going to go to Oregon and establish a home up there, my oldest daughter stayed with my mom so that she could stay helping with the goats, with the intention of her coming up and joining us when we got up to Oregon. And when this whole CPS thing went down, I was talking to my daughter on the phone when CPS showed up at the door, and I told my daughter, oh my God, I have to go. CPS is at the door and they have a sheriff. And she told my mom, and my mom said, oh my God, they're going to take those babies. And she decided that she wasn't going to let them take my daughter too. She said, I don't care how well they screen their foster fathers. I don't trust them with my 14-year-old daughter. So we told them that my daughter lived with my mom so that my daughter wouldn't have to go into the foster system. Excuse me, another blessing that came from all of this, and it's kind of funny because we joke with my oldest daughter about it now. When my kids turn 18, they get this massive settlement. They're part of the settlement when they turn 18. And I chose to have it set up where they get monthly amounts so they can just live comfortably for years as unschoolers, getting to do whatever the heck they want with an automatic income. I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. I mean, I hate that I had to make that choice. I wish that they could have made that choice for themselves at 18. And there was only, a certain number of options. I'm like, well, can they get a huge amount and then payments? And, and they're not that flexible. But anyway, another bonus is that if my kids decide to go to college, they get to go for free, because children that are a ward of the state get to go to college for free. Little perks along the way, I guess. Let's hope they go to college, right? So they can take advantage of that perk. I remember so many times being, having all of these feelings and these fears. I remember one time. Did you guys ever read the books Dinotopia? We grew up on them, my brother and I did. My brother was obsessed with them. My mom read them to him. Well, they came out with a movie, and I was like, oh my gosh, my son is obsessed with dinosaurs. He's gonna love Dinotopia. It's about these people that, crash land on this island where humans and dinosaurs are living cohesively together, right? And they, in partnership. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So we're watching, and I'm like, let's watch this movie. We're watching the movie. And there's this part where, so there's these two brothers, and one of them had raised this little baby dinosaur from the time it was an egg. They're adventurous brothers, and they get into trouble. And they end up in a courtroom. And the judge takes the dinosaur baby away. And I lost my shit in the middle of a Dinotopia movie. I had to excuse myself from the room and go lose my shit in the bedroom so my kids could enjoy the movie. All these moments, But what kept bringing me back, I get stuck in that for a minute at times. What kept bringing me back is even writing this book, preparing this speech to come here. I had like a half a day where I was like, whoo, I was so off. But what kept bringing me back is looking at this life in front of my face, seeing my kids so totally okay, and knowing that it was just my healing work to do because they were okay. What did I need? How could I give that to myself? How could I request that in my community and see who wanted to show up that was a hell yes? That's where healing happened. That's where healing happened. Yeah. I want to take a moment and thank each of you for bearing witness to my story, to my experience. I want to send each of you so much love. And empowerment and trust is not something I ever would have chosen for myself, for my kids, but it ended up being pretty fucking important in our life journey. And it's not something I'd ever wish on any of you or anyone. But if it's something that you experience, I hope that you can walk away. I hope that you can go through the experience and come out the other side better, deeper connected to your tribe, plugged into this. Funny, I remember, my daughter was 1, so this would be, 3 years before that. I remember feeling this divine calling to step into my power. It was just like, I'm feeling called to say, how do I do this? And I'm trying to figure out in my mind, how do I step into my power? And I'm like, okay, universe, I guess you helped me with that, gave me this opportunity because, man, I've never been as powerful as I was when I was fighting for my babies. Yeah. Fighting for myself. Yeah. So yeah, if any of you ends up in any kind of situation like that, and it doesn't even just have to be CPS, any challenging situation you experience, I wish that for you. By about 2 years ago or so, I went to this women's retreat thing. It was it's called the goddess, what is it? The warrior goddess. Warrior goddess. Anyway, at the end of the retreat, we fire walked. We walked on freaking fire. It was incredible. It was absolutely amazing. In our heads, we tell these stories about if you touch fire, you get burned. But then how do these people walk on fire, right? How did I walk on fire? What we learned is that you have to get your energy up bigger than the fire's energy. There's vibrations, right? Energy vibrations. You need to get your energy vibration up bigger than the fire so that when you walk across it, it doesn't burn you. And even if it does, it gives you information, right? So when I walked across the fire, I walked across 3 times, and I got what they call kissed by a coal on the bottom of my foot in the same spot twice. And then you can go back and afterwards and look at reflexology and see what part of your body the fire kissed, and then it gives you information about what's going on inside of your body where there's an imbalance, right? That sort of embodies the experience that we have with CPS, right? There's getting our energy up higher than a challenging situation that we're going to go through, right? Building up our energy, building up our team, our community, our tribe, so our energy is bigger than the energy of the thing that we're facing, right? And the places where Thank you again, all of you. And I'll be around all weekend, and I also am on Facebook, Nova Om. I used to say I'm the only Nova Om, but now I'm not. There's a couple others, but I'm the only one with this face. So if you want to connect with me, if you have people that want to connect with me that could use some help with their challenges or CPS in general or stories or whatever, it's what I'm here for. Not just here in Anarchapulco, it's what I'm here on this earth for. So please, please feel free to reach out with me. Reach out to me if you want to connect. Thank you, blessings. Thank you, thank you, thank you.